In a world filled with conflict, in a universe comprised of differences, there's one thing that absolutely everything shares in common. We all exist. Including two guys named Jack and Michael, who like to chat about that very thing over a good cup of coffee. Let's pay them a visit, shall we?
Existence Brewing.
Sounds like the old dial-up internet connection to me. This song has always reminded me of that. With the little cymbal clashes that used to come before that. Remember that? It was a wonderful noise.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That sound to me always meant pornography. We're going to the land of pornography.
Oh my God, of course it would mean that to you.
Oh, Mr. Hansen.
Hello. I've been using the internet since like the mid-90s, like on a Unix shell. I think I talked about this at one point. Like I was on the internet before most people were on the internet, and it wasn't because of me and my tech-savvy forwardness. It was because there was a kid, the kid of the parents who owned the business I worked for was just mad scientist tech. He was in his early 20s, and he hung out with, you ever seen the movie? It's horror. I hate this movie with a passion. Angelina Jolie's in it. It's one of her first roles. Hackers. You ever seen that?
Yes.
Oh my God. It's so campy. I can't.
Sandra Bullock was in one called The Net.
Yeah, that's a different one. That's a decent flick.
Yeah.
But Hackers. Oh my God. My ex-wife loved Hackers. And she so could have been in it because she's like so one of those people.
Yeah.
Just too cool for school, but like in a total behind the scenes, never see them way.
Stick it to the man.
In any event, this group of friends that my boss's kid hung out with were just like those people. They were the people from Hackers. So he got me hooked up with the internet in like 1994. And so you'd get online, and it was very war games. It was very Greetings, Professor Falcon. You know, it was.
Wow, you were in the early stages.
I shopped and it changed my life because I remember packing around like my big want list of CDs and maybe a couple vinyl pieces that was like maybe 8 or 9 long. That was it. But it was so dog-eared. I'd had it since '86. Like, it's the impossible, man. You'll never find them. They don't exist. If they're out there, there's only a few copies. They come from these rare foreign countries. You're not going to find them. I had within 6 months of being online and being shown what to do, I had every single one of those in my possession.
Wow, you were determined.
Easy. They were easy, too. I met traders in Finland, Germany. I was shopping online at a place in Germany, the Netherlands. So
that brings back so many good memories because I remember the browser that I had was Netscape Navigator. And you had to subscribe to it, man. It was like a long-distance phone line that you had to subscribe to. It was a service. It was a subscription to the world.
They had the share lookalike porn website, the Fishnets.
Yeah. So. Oh, yeah. Well, so, I was probably in the internet. It had a lot to do with my evolution as a human because, my brother and I would sit on the internet. Our first computer as a family, the computer, was near our kitchen, and it was in this area that was kind of like a library, and so it was very clear to me that the computer was meant for serious business. It's set right next to the fax machine,
Ooh, you guys had a fax machine.
Oh yeah, we had a fax machine. We had a secondary line. Oh yeah, we were high tech. So we had the CD-ROM, and we had the thing that the CD that was going to replace the Britannica, the Encyclopedia Britannica. So you didn't have to dedicate a whole bookshelf to the Encyclopedia Britannicas that you bought for $20.99 per volume. A through...
The trees rejoiced.
Yeah, A through Z. You had to buy every
the trees
letter.
Were happy.
Yeah. And so this one CD was going to replace the Britannica. And we just thought that was so cool. So, we got into that and we were searching all these things. And then my parents introduced us to Netscape Navigator. We were like, well, what's this? And they're like, oh yeah, look, you can look up the weather. Whoa, you can look up the weather. And then it was like, well, let's find out what movies are playing. And so then it was, doing that. And then it quickly evolved, or should I say devolved, to let's look up Cindy Crawford.
Oh, yeah.
And so then it kind of went down another rabbit hole. And at that time, graphics and everything, it was very pixelated. And so graphics wasn't really the reason you were on the internet. It's not like the internet today. The internet today is very imagery centered. But I would say that, it was kind of like it was like a terminal that you would look up a book on at the public library. I mean, it was very just text driven.
Well, it's just such a central hub of our lives, our daily lives in Western society. The Hopi warned of this, their prophecy about the entire landscape being covered with a web, a worldwide web. Interesting. Another Hopi prophecy that sounds like it came true. That was part of the Koyaanisqatsi. I grew up with computers. My dad ran a business. He was a genius. For the sociopath that he was a genius mind. He invented a number of things that you probably see or even use today. And his advent that made him all this money in the late 1970s was he actually developed a computer program. He wrote it himself. And so he was a 1970s computer programmer, which those guys were, a rare breed. But the algorithm that he developed would actually look at stock trends, and it figured out how to invest money based on those trends. And he made a lot of people a lot of money with that, and had some offers to buy it for big dough, and never sold it, blew all the money because he was just a crazy son of a bitch too. But that means that I grew up with computers, and they were in the basement because that's where the business was located. And the floppy disks, they were bigger than your laptop computer is. And he had I remember one of his big prizes he bought early 80s, maybe 1980, 79, right around there, was a portable computer. Their laptops, no such thing. But this was as small as computers got, and it weighed a shit ton. I mean, it was huge. And that thing sat a lot of times. That kind of got used more, wound up being used more for my use. There was a Dungeons and Dragons style choose your own adventure game on it that you could put in yes and no and ask questions that I played. Then there was computer chess, which my uncle was absolutely addicted to, like it was crack cocaine, with a white queen to pawn 4.
Right.
Oh,
you had to type in the coordinates of each player.
Yeah, but now that I think about it, it's like I had computers. I have always had technology around me. And then, like I said, in the 90s, I was wired to the internet thanks to the people that I worked for in 94. And so I was online years before anybody was. For as much as the internet has connected me, I still wonder to this day, what kind of a person would Jack Hansen be? And more apropos, how much money would he have saved over the years had the internet not been
very true
a thing during his lifetime? Because that is my absolute favorite thing to do online. Not shop so much, but search.
Yeah.
I'm a searcher at heart. So
you're a collector at heart too.
Well, and so I'll get on a kick. I'll be because I'm on I'm on a big rainbow sweater kick these days, because I love everything multicolored. And so now I'm into these vintage sweaters. And so I look and it's like, ooh, that one's nice, but it doesn't quite make the cut. And then this one, almost, and then, I have to have this one. And then so there goes another $78 or whatever it is to the eBay seller. So, yeah, so I have spent a lot of money online over the years. And for as much as I, dash capitalism, I'm certainly a big spender when it comes to that.
You're a consumer.
Got me, yeah. But I'm, of course, very eclectic, very non-mainstream.
You're every color. You're every color.
Thank you, Sam. The Sandown Clown. I am all colors.
I'm all colors.
My favorite thing that anybody's ever said, and of course he came from another planet and scared the hell out of 2 children. Sounds perfect to me.
Of course, as they would.
Boys. Two British boys, too. They always are British. It's like the Harry Potter thing.
Yeah.
If she'd have set that in New Jersey, there'd have been one book and it would have been over in 15 minutes. You know what I mean?
Hey, let me see this. Hey.
School? I ain't going to some fucking wizard school. What the fuck are you talking about over here? Dumbledore? What the fuck is that? I'm going to kick your ass, Dumbledore.
Sounds like the guy who runs a book down the block, you know?
They're busy casting spells to get, like, co-eds drunk, and, it's just like, there's no wizardry in this. It's all about cash and, looking good. Look at this suit that I made myself. I got this new spell, right? It's a chiffon spell.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Oh, God,
well,
J.K. Rowling.
Speaking of the interwebs, I ran across a interesting trailer for a subject that we have talked about extensively, and our audience will well, I mean, if they've hung around for this long, they're probably into it. So let's listen to it. So the name of the trailer is, or the name of the documentary is The Program. And let's take a listen.
In 2017, the New York Times published a story exposing a secret government program investigating UFOs.
That story was kind of a catalyst for a lot of things that have happened since. Members of Congress started to ask questions.
Instruments report there is something there. There are flight characteristics that we can't explain.
UAPs are unexplained. It's true. They need to be investigated.
Here we are having a hearing where just a few years ago, we didn't even acknowledge that these things were real.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
You're telling me people have come forward claiming firsthand knowledge of craft of non-human origin?
That's correct. We have sources who have asserted not only that there have been crashes, but there have been crash retrievals.
Do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
Biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they human or non-human?
Non-human.
Oh, they were non-human.
We're sitting here today because the American people are being lied to.
We are the American government, and we are open, and we're going to be open about this.
What has been revealed:
non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity.
Is only part of the story.
The pressure's on. The Pentagon, the CIA, they're going to have to answer the mail.
Some are risking everything.
Have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life?
Yes, personally.
To uncover the rest.
What is being done to verify the assertion that the U.S. government has spaceships of non-human intelligence in their possession?
That kind of revelation unearths people's beliefs.
I would go to jail to say things that I've been exposed to in the program.
The Program.
It's a long trailer. So non-human intelligence is so intelligences might be stretching it, but Taylor Swift, obviously, it's a documentary about Taylor Swift. The non-humans are here.
The origins of Taylor Swift. You know, the fact that they had Peter Coyote narrate that documentary trailer really kind of, I think, speaks to the legitimacy that they were trying to reach with this one.
Huge fan of Pete. Love Pete's work. He seems to stand for all the right things. Now, you never know who's shilling out or who's been threatened and has to kind of, it's time to duck and cover. I got to do what they're telling me to do, because it's really easy to say, too, well, if anybody ever showed up at my door wearing black and, sunglasses with a cord sticking out of their ass and told me that, I was going to be killed unless I shut up on my podcast, there's no way. I highly doubt that. We tend to value our corporeal existences quite a bit, especially if we have things riding on it, like family and children and, that, as well as your boat and RV and all the other stuff that Flo looks after at Progressive. So, I think it's really easy to pick on people. Like to me, Shaquille O'Neal, for example, gets no pass because he's just a fucking shill. The man will literally take money to advertise anything, right? The general car insurance, I mean, come on. Did he even when has he ever needed the general car insurance? When will
Never.
he ever need the general car insurance? It's like, yeah, I want to pay $5,800 a year to drive, like a fucking Corvair, and get basic liability. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I've had 6 accidents and 10 DUIs. Anyway, to me, there's a difference between shilling out in a celebrity capacity and then these operatives or celebrities, or like they threatened Carl Sagan, for example. That's rumored, at least, and I have no doubt that was the case. It's going to be hard for you to say, no, fuck off. I'm going to continue doing what I've always done, which is tell the truth. Look, you've got a lot riding on this. It's your life, and these people are serious. I mean, listen to what Stephen Greer says, and you'll hear about the psychopaths that are involved in this stuff. And I happen to believe him, so if you don't, that's fine. We all are in a position to have to kind of take one trail or another and really not have any idea of what's on it or where it may lead. But, for what it's worth, Peter Coyote seems very legit to me, and he always has been a stand-up guy. So I really like Pete. So
I think that speaks to the credibility that they're trying to achieve there. A lot of the audio that was gathered was from the testifying that I forget his first name, but his last name is Gressett.
Luis Elizondo? Oh, okay.
So a lot of that is centered on a lot of information that has already been made public, obviously, through news coverage and C-SPAN and whatever, but then there's also a lot of interviews. I think the amazing thing is that they doubled down on the sound effect. I mean, I don't know how much they paid for that, but I mean, they've got a lot of in that documentary, or in that trailer at least. So they're all kind of leading to then, we're going to get to meet these things, right? Are we going to finally get to meet these beings that we're talking about? And the answer is no. It's just going to continue to fester in all of our brains. And
I'm thinking of Peter Thomas, all of a sudden, the guy who narrates Forensic Files, that guy. It was a non-biological entity.
Yeah, right.
Can you imagine going on a date with that guy, or like having sweet nothings whispered in your ear by him? Like what his wife must be like.
Yeah, what would that sound like, Jack?
Pete Thomas's wife. I'm going to remove everything now. Yeah, then the sound effect goes off, right? The boom.
Yeah.
I think about it like this. Okay, so to me, this whole UAP discussion is really becoming a lot like Back to the Future, or it's becoming a lot like, pick your favorite 80s movie.
Footloose.
Footloose. Fine. Good. It's becoming Footloose in that we have an entire generation who was already immersed in a world that was Footloose. We have not nearly to the degree as the actual movie with Kevin Bacon that millions of people paid to go see, but i.e. there was already a culture of ufology that existed. And I don't know if we call it UAPology now or something, since we've changed the acronym.
The acronym, right.
There have been people that have been deep diving into this subject for decades, and the general population was not familiar with their work. Now, all of a sudden, we have, and that would be, I would be on that other list. I am familiar with
I would agree with that
work because I have been following the subject since I was a child, actually. And, it was more difficult to follow then. And then with the advent of the internet, obviously, information starts. And now with the internet being what it is, it's a little harder, actually, to find certain information because they have definitely cordoned it off into certain dark corners of the internet where it can't be as easily accessed or seen. But I feel like we've got another crowd emerging here very rapidly.
Big time.
And those are people that are kind of late to the game. And it's fine but what I look at is, why are they at the table now? They're at the table finally because an official source has put an official narrative in place to tell them they have a reason to be there. And that immediately should cause everybody to pump the brakes that's in the new camp and say, okay, whoa. The governments of the world never tell us to take interest in something unless they have a very vested interest in letting us know why, or leading us along with this carrot. So I think that the new gen that's coming online with this phenomenon and wondering the same things that we always have, where do they come from, what are they, what do they want, etc., all that stuff, should very much take heed of what those who have been studying the phenomenon for many decades prior to this have to say before they at all consider what's being given to them by certainly the official sources or by any of these newfangled guys and gals who are all over the internet making waves now that it's a mainstream topic. Because remember before, even though 60% of Americans, polled in the United States would tell you, oh yeah, aliens are real, they exist somewhere in the universe, you're still really kind of in the tinfoil hat crowd to a lot of the mainstreamers if you just start talking about UFOs and UAPs and alien beings from another planet or dimension on your podcast.
Right.
This has legitimized that discussion. And that alone is a massive step for the powers that be that know whatever they know and want to do whatever they want to do with it and see it continue on and have us believe what they want us to believe about it. So
yeah, there's some value put on the information.
That would be the first thing that I would say, is I would very much, consider the sources, because usually anytime you go back in history, you're going to receive better information about what is already known because you're going to be closer to the history of it. I mean, the Roswell incident, for example, we're coming up on, 70 years ago that happened, I believe, maybe 80. Actually, it would be 80 years ago in 2027. So, yeah, we're coming up on 80 years ago that happened. Everybody that was connected with that is dead. Even the son of Major Jesse Marcel, who was the guy who supposedly took pieces of the wreckage home and showed it to his family and was like, what the hell is this? This is crazy, had that moment. Even I believe he is either dead or very close to, he's very old now. He may have died. I don't remember. But the point being that whole incident is just gone because all we have are the stories. We have the newspaper clipping, the original Roswell, and we have the government story and then their next story and then their next story because they put out like 5 trying to explain away, hey, don't look at this anymore. It's innocuous. There's nothing to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's prosaic. I mean, it's not because it's a super secret weather balloon that you shouldn't see, but it's just a weather balloon. It's not alien life. Well, that's not what they told the New Mexico newspaper that they originally phoned and said, yeah, we got a saucer out here before there was protocol not to say that. So anyway, that basically is just all going to be they said, we said sort of stuff. But I would go further back, because the further back you're going to get anecdotal information even from that story, the closer you're probably going to be to the truth than now, because now it's just an oral tradition that's been handed down from one person to another that saw this. It's like me talking about it right now. I saw this special and read this book back then that did this, and I'm just passing it along. So to me, you got to go back in time. We got to get in the DeLorean and head back and get closer to when these things were actually happening, because this is not the first time that the nation was UFO crazy. That happened in the late 40s and early 1950s because have you seen the video, the old film of the lights over Washington, D.C.? I mean, there were numerous craft flying in formations over the nation's capital night after night after night. There's the incident that took place in Southern California that occurred during the Second World War when something was over downtown Los Angeles for quite a while, and people were killed in that incident because of they blasted it with so many ordnance and so many rounds of ammunition that things fell on people on the streets of LA, killed several people. That was a major incident, and it was obviously an unidentified craft. They couldn't figure out what it was. So at that time, in that window of 10 or 15 years, there was some major shit happening, and we've completely forgotten about it because, of course, we have. Time has moved on. It's completely passed. And most of the people who were involved in that were adult enough to really have a better understanding, at least of what it could have potentially been or its ramifications, are dead now.
Yeah.
Or they're extremely old. So I think it's important for us to take a look retrospectively before we charge headlong into the future, along with Luis Elizondo and all these other people that are telling us what to think and, what the official narrative is, and we're coming clean. And all that. I mean,
there's so many experts now, there's so many people who have firsthand knowledge of sources that they're not going to disclose because, you and I have had this conversation. off the program before, and I'm relatively new to the conversation, but I think that is troubling in the sense that, you know, there's always these people who are kind of riding on the fringes. And we're not just talking about the guy, like you had said, the tinfoil hats, the guy who's sitting in a bar who says that he was abducted and probed by aliens. I mean, we're talking about people who, according to their credentials, had connections to the government. They have things to lose by disclosing the information that they're disclosing. And now all of a sudden we've got elected officials saying, well, if this is one of our adversaries and technology that they're using possibly against us, it's in our best interest to figure out what these things are. Whether they're according to his theory, their theory, or whatever, which I think is going to then become this giant ping pong ball match eventually, because nobody really truly knows, do they? And I think a lot of people have hung their hat on this theory or that theory, and you have a lot of experts in the kitchen.
Well, Bob Lazar said that 30 years ago. I mean, Bob Lazar came forward and said, I've seen these craft. They are at what everybody ubiquitously calls Area 51, or colloquially calls Area 51. And it's the Groom Lake facility. And by the way, the Groom Lake facility, as we all know, is inaccessible to prying eyes. They bought every chunk of land now, so you can't even see it from the ridges that you used to be able to, because the military didn't even want you looking at it through a lens from a great distance away. And, you know, the Janet flights that go out of Las Vegas, where they, you know, put all the employees on in the morning and fly them out to the base, or put them on buses sometimes to take them up there. I guess there's a certain contingent of workers that does that route. You know, secret after secret, but Bob Lazar claimed this stuff 30 years ago, and now we just have more people saying. Of course, everybody said he was either a fruitcake, or if you believed what he said, then here come the tinfoil hats again. Stanton Friedman hated the guy. Stanton Friedman was one of the most respected ufologists ever, and was a nuclear physicist. I mean, so he had a great backing, educationally speaking, in a hard science, a foundational science, to try and study the phenomenon. And he thought Bob Lazar was a crackpot. He thought he was the biggest liar ever, whereas other ufologists said, absolutely not. Everything that we know stands to point to what he's saying to be absolutely true. Look, I think the number one thing is to just, it's expected that you won't notice the elephant in the room. And to me, the elephant in the room is this phenomenon is real. No matter what anybody would say, most people have seen something in the sky at night or daytime or whenever, no matter what it might have been. We all probably have seen something we couldn't necessarily explain. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't have a prosaic explanation, but we've all seen that. And then there are some extraordinary cases, and that is exactly what Project Blue Book investigated in the late 40s and early 50s, was this phenomenon that was burgeoning, because we were on the verge of planet-wide planetary contact, it seemed. I mean, they were flying over the White House. Everybody with the, why don't they land on the White House lawn? They were over the White House in droves at that time, trying to get our attention. And there's lots of rumors about a secret meeting between Eisenhower and aliens at a base in Southern California, when a couple of handshakes were made and an exchange of technology was agreed upon, but it wasn't in our best interest and all that. Well, look, nobody's really ever going to know that. So the elephant in the room, though, is that this phenomenon has officially been investigated. That's not subject to some kind of a rumor. That's not just hearsay. That it's all in print. It's all on file with the U.S. government. You can look it up. I mean, even through the Freedom of Information Act, it's all over the internet. Those projects were real. Anybody in the government that goes back that far, has connections to back that far, they can look it up. They can tell you that's real. So they studied the phenomenon at one time, and then suddenly the next narrative was, well, we have no interest in the subject. And by saying that there's no interest in the subject over the course of 40 years or more then until now, what you're basically saying is that you people are crazy. That's what I think you're saying. You're basically saying we've moved from there is something out there and we're asking you all to do your due diligence as United States citizens and keep an eye on the skies above you and report anything you see so that we can study it and investigate it and find out what in the hell's going on over our airspace, because, of course, that's what they're worried about, their airspace, because they have their pissed lines in the sand floating invisibly up in the sky, too, this air that they own. But anyway, all that aside, then suddenly the narrative shifts, and for, again, 4 or 5 decades, it's, well, we don't care about it. And what does we don't care about it say? You know, what if you ask me to go to a movie or come over and play Pachisi, and I say, no, Michael, I'm not interested in that, what are you going to think? Okay, well, Jack thinks Pachisi's dumb. You know, Jack thinks Pachisi is worthless. It's a complete waste of time. Of course, I've just told you, no, I don't want to come over and play Pachisi with you. So to me, that's exactly what you're saying when you're saying repeatedly for decades, we have no interest in the subject, is why are you bothering? This is nuts. This is insanity. The United States government doesn't care, so why should you? Then all of a sudden, Uncle Sam is pointing right at you and saying, we want you to know that we've been lying to you forever. But that's not really our message. Our message is, well, we've got to admit now that we are a little bit interested in these craft that have been circling us or perturbing us or doing all these irregular movements at sea and all this stuff. So to me, the elephant in the room you have to look at is, look, at one time there was a massive vested interest in it. Then suddenly it changed for a long time, and now all of a sudden there's an interest in it again. The bottom line is you cannot trust any government of any nation anywhere to tell the actual truth. And it's going to take the actual truth to really have this phenomenon mean something to each of us individually and all of us as a human collective. And so we can't rely on the governments of the world to do this for us. They just have too many ulterior motives at stake. They have their own agenda. And so we have to do it. And that's always been, I'm parroting what Stephen Greer has always said.
Yeah.
Because then it's a real, honest commitment to reaching across the cosmic lines and shaking hands with our neighbors rather than some agenda that we don't even know what it is because we're not a high enough clearance. And how many people are a high enough clearance? It's like the 1% that runs the world. They probably don't even know half of it. So
well, and that's where I think some of the landmines lay, is in this kind of red tape, so to speak. And even when you and I started this podcast, one of the things that I think early on we latched onto was that the Pentagon released a statement saying that they had no verifiable evidence for the claims that the U.S. government and private companies have had access to reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. But they never said anything about UAPs in terms of just the phenomenon. I mean, I think that that's where the red tape lies, is it's like, no, there wasn't a juggler in the room, but what about the guy holding the sword? You know, and I think that that's kind of where they like to lie, is they like to lie in the hyperbole and behind the red tape of being able to say, well, no, it's not this. And some people get so stuck on, well, they've been reverse engineering technology. Well, no, I mean, the government has disclosed that, we haven't been reversing engineering technology. And so they latch on to just these little crumbs of information, or these little crumbs of data. I wanted to kind of shift gears. The reason I like to use this as an example, because I think we are seeing an evolution. And we're seeing an evolution not only from UAPs, but also we're seeing this evolution in how these subjects get created, potentially the ramifications that it can have on the public. I shared a link with you to a man who, his name is Kristen Harloff. He has a UAP news YouTube channel called Down to Earth with Kristen Harloff. And the image is clearly clickbait. It has a big asteroid or some kind of a mass on it, and then it says, object is course correcting, ? Congress briefed question mark. And WTF.
Yeah, the story is that there's some massive object that's been detected by NASA, obviously, or some secret space agency somewhere that is on a course for Earth, and it is what they're calling course correcting. So it's not moving in a way that an asteroid or a dwarf planet or something of similar size that would be, non-intelligently controlled would behave. It's actually making little movements here and there, and it's turning left and turning right, and it's stopping at the 7-Eleven on Pluto,
some far off land,
that sort of thing.
And then it goes into like a 13-minute or even an hour-long podcast talking about this object and what he thinks it might be, and one of his little contributors is on there too. I want to play a little segment from that podcast near the beginning, just to frame this for our listeners.
Is what is this? And I think that we should tell people. So I just think that if enough people knew about it, that it would be like, can we drop everything and can we stop fighting now? And who cares about any of this stuff? What is that thing floating in the sky?
Yeah, and part of me thinks about how these systems work. I can imagine a world where there are still, in the face of earth-shattering news, no pun intended, that there are still people who would try to figure out a grift and how to make money off of it and how to take advantage of it. But for the most part, I agree with you. I think someone would crack on that. It's too big. Or the story isn't what we're imagining it to be.
So, and I mean, to me, the very first thing that I would say is that the distances we are talking about here, folks, are in terms of, in corporeal terms, as far as where humans can physically go, are, to say the least, vast. The closest star to Earth, if I'm remembering my basic astronomy, is Alpha Centauri, and it's a long fucking ways away.
Yeah.
We aren't going to get on a rocket ship and just float along and reach Alpha Centauri to say hello to anybody that might be revolving around it in a planetary sense. It's not going to happen. So how that would be expected of any other sentient life forms within even this wing of the galaxy, or even the solar system for that matter. Let's say there's an underground contingent of beings that are on Titan, one of the moons of Saturn that's been widely, or Enceladus that's been looked at because it has liquid water potentially and it might harbor life. Let's say there's a group of really cool lizard creatures that want to say hello, and they're like, it's time to go say hello to the humans. They're not boarding a ship and getting here if their biology is anything even close to being what ours is, which if they're going to be stuck in some, I don't know what the equivalent word would be, we're terrestrial, they're Enceladin, they're going to need, they're not going to be able to do that. So how an object is going to, let's load up, and all of a sudden it's a 12 or 14 or 15,000 year voyage to get from wherever they hail from to where we hail from. And they're specifically interested in us, by the way, too, and nothing else they could reach within that scope of incredible distance. I'm not buying it. I don't think that's how these beings arrive in our atmosphere. I don't think it's how they arrive on our planet. I think they get here by different means. And I think that, again, it's the elephant in the room scientifically. I am not a physicist. I don't know hardly anything about bending space or time from the stance of equations that are on a blackboard that, Ramanujan is creating or something like that. I can't solve that shit. But the elephant in the room would suggest, again, using your just common sense, a cosmic common sense even, would tell you, your intuition would tell you, your heart space would tell you, look, it's not how it's done. It's clunky. It's unreliable. It doesn't happen that way. Now, it leaves the question open, of course, which is how do they get it done? Well, I don't know, but it's not the Millennium Falcon. The Millennium Falcon, first of all, that's the least aerodynamic. That looks like a bad razor. that came from like China. That looks like
it's a cool
really
ship.
bad.
Okay.
It's a cool ship, but it's fictitious in all senses of the word because first of all, that thing's not getting off the ground and going anywhere.
No.
Second of all, it's sure as hell not going light speed with the human beings and the Wookiee on board without the beings on board turning into light themselves or imploding. I mean, it's fantasy. And so we tend to anchor ourselves in fantasy because we're used to it and we like to think in those terms. And we're also highly anthropocentric. We can't get off of being human. So we've got to start stretching out the box that is our imagination and starting to get a little bit more creative about how is this done? How does this happen? And without landing on any specifics, because again, we're not all like physicists. We're not all nuclear physicists. We can't understand this stuff necessarily. Particle physicists, we can at least grasp the basic comprehension of it's not done this way because that doesn't make sense. And so that's what I would say to the course correcting object. Doesn't make sense. I don't know what it is, if it's even a real thing, but if it is a real thing, I don't think it's extraterrestrials coming to say hello in a few years. This is another ticking time bomb for people to get other people riled up about and do a podcast about.
Yep.
Case closed.
You named it. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. We can pretty much just throw away the next 20 minutes. I really just think it's clickbait. And I think that now that this topic has become, again, like you said, mainstream, it's going to go through all the washing machines of our society, and it's going to be parsed out into every little podcast or YouTube channel or whatever. And I mean, these guys are even saying, oh, well, people are going to make money off of it. Well, I mean, let's see how many subscribers.
They're making money off
exactly. How many subscribers does this guy have on his channel?
33,000.
Exactly. So, the Millennium Falcon, by the way, did make the Kessel Run in 20 parsecs.
12 parsecs. Oh, there was 12 parsecs.
20.
I'm not for sure Han Solo said the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, but okay, whatever. Maybe that was when Lando flew it.
Yeah, well, hyperspace.
Lando was a better pilot than Han.
Well, yeah, in hyperspace, you don't just fly through a star, kid.
So, I've culled every bit of footage that I can. Lando does not pilot the Millennium Falcon until what in my mind is the third and should have been the final installment, Return of the Jedi. And he's actually at Jabba's palace to help rescue Han from the carbonite, because that made perfect sense, right? It's like
totally.
So we're flying at light speed across dimensions of space and time, and we need to encase someone in a crude block of what essentially is shale, like stone, in order to transport them so they don't move around. And we couldn't just knock them out, or I don't know. Apparently they don't have Demerol or anything like that in that, but okay, that's fine. So anyway, I have called through all the frames as slow as possible of Billy D. Williams portraying Lando Calrissian piloting the Millennium Falcon, and I know it's there, but I just can't find it. You've got to know that there's a cold Colt 45 sitting there somewhere, and I just can't see it because Billy D did some commercials for Colt 45, and the ads are priceless. So, and to me, to sit next to that talking mouse, that Nine Nun, his name is Nine Nun, by the way, that thing, that thing, to sit next to him for a whole movie and have to pilot that thing, you'd need a few beers. And that's saying something, because Jack, of course, doesn't drink.
Yeah, no, I think it's official that it's clickbait, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. But I think that we'll continue to circle back to the disclosure, because I think it makes for interesting fodder on a lot of the concepts that we discuss in detail on this podcast.
I watched, I'll use one of my least favorite cliches, I'll be honest with you, but I will. I maybe made it through 12 minutes of that thing.
Yeah.
And I know I do a podcast, and I know this is, almost makes me sound like a villain of the industry, but I really can't get into very many podcasts. I podcast, I work on the radio. So for me to sit down and actually want to listen to someone else talk is kind of a hard sell. There are a few people that I admire and I like to listen to, but generally a lot of podcasts, I just don't do them. So this vlog, and to me it's more of a vlog because it's on YouTube and you can see them. The one thing I will say that they did allude to that I felt like was fair enough was something that you would hear me say about that, which is take in everything, go listen to different podcasts and
Absolutely.
then use your own judgment. You have a great barometer for what is bullshit and what's not. Like I just described 2 or 3 very predominant elephants in the room for you. You have to be able to see those are there too. They're not circus animals that are hiding in the cracks of your couch for you to find and go, oh, hey man, when you're stoned watching Independence Day. These are big, giant things that are sitting right before you and remember, what's the number one CIA rule? If you want to hide something, hide it in plain sight. That's where you hide something. So you do the same thing with information, just like you would a building that houses all the black operatives and all of the secret stuff. It's going to look just like the water district that you drive by every day. It's not going to be out in the boonies somewhere with a giant fence around it and a bunch of spikes and things like that. It's not going to happen. They figured this stuff out a long time ago. And human behaviors are very redundant, you could say. They're very monotonous because the mundane doesn't speak to human beings. We fall into the hamster wheel with the mundane. Look at your routine to go to work and pay taxes. And, it's the same thing. But when something extraordinary comes up, it catches the imagination by the scruff. And so that's not going to be something the governments are going to partake in. Hey, let's make this super secret base look like something Dr. Evil would build. It's not their MO. So that's all I'm asking you is to just, it doesn't take walking around through the footprints of these subjects too much before you're going to be able to see a pattern and go, oh, this is what makes sense and this what doesn't make sense. So I think in saying that, at least they were making a good point, because I did hear them say they were encouraging people to go check out a lot of podcasts, including those, like I said at the outset of ours today, of the people that have been deep diving into this subject for decades and have been vastly more invested in it than them. And they also admit that they are not experts on the subject in whatever way. And so there are some disclaimers in there, I guess, to their fairness. But in general, the podcast wasn't for me. There was nothing of value for me there. It's just 2 guys who kind of like to smoke bowls and watch Independence Day a lot of times. And they get together and do a podcast, and that's great for them. There's a lot of people that have podcasts. We have a podcast. They have a vlog. So.
Right. They have an audience.
I would just say common sense. Everybody with common sense. And if you asked anybody, you'd say, where does common sense come from? Well, common sense comes from your intellect. Common sense comes from your brain. No, I would argue that it doesn't come from your brain. The best common sense comes from your intuitive self, which is in your heart space. The best common sense is, what is my heart telling me to do? And this is where, I never remember his name, but he's a ufologist. And I used to harass him because he would bash on his vlog. He would bash Richard Dolan is his name. And I very much respect Richard Dolan. I think he's a fantastic researcher. I think he's done a lot of great work on the subject, but he bashes heart-based thinking. And I will not have it, because my argument to him, just in the comments section of his videos, I haven't done it for years now, but it was always, Richard, did you ever stop and think that it might be thinking from a heart-based perspective that's required for us to actually understand what these things really are and what they might actually mean and want? That putting it into a human intellectual spin cycle is not going to spit you out any answers that are satisfactory, because that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
Because these things may very well be what they've been described to be by some people, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, like E.T. These things have figured out a way to, or have just naturally coalesced through the process of cosmic evolution into that bucket we call love. And they're existing within that. And the brain can't know that. All of your research and all of your papers and all of your, well, it's this high and that big and this person saw it and it's not swamp gas, it doesn't add up to what's in the heart space. So I would make that argument for everybody to process all of the information they receive with this subject in mind, run it through your heart space as much as you do your brain, and see what you come up with, because the answer may very well be in between those pecs that you have kind of let go since college, more than it would be between those ears that are taking in all of this audio constantly from all these podcasts.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that there's also a sense that we're going to be able to make some kind of sense out of something that we're operating on a different frequency. We're operating on a different spectrum than these beings, because, quite honestly, how would they be able to elude us for this long?
Well, I think the one question that always drives me the craziest, that's the most anthropocentric in the whole thing, the most human, just driven in the whole thing, is what do they want? There's always the, where do they come from?
Yeah.
There's always, where do they come from? How do they get here? What do they want? And that's always the most histrionic voice in the bunch. What do they want? And then there's all these stories floating around how they want Uranus because they want to probe it, or they want your fetus because they're doing some kind of a hybrid project. Or, look, I don't know. Jack Hansen doesn't have the magic answer. No one has landed in my living room or come to me in the middle of the night, thank God, because I'd probably shit myself. I would like to think I'm ready for contact, but I don't know, not in that way. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know, and I'm not going to provide one without knowing. I've got theories of my own, but those are just that. They're theories like we all have. But I think we have to at least be able to showcase the idea to ourselves that, just as Yoda said in, getting back to Star Wars, no, there is no why. There is no why. There is no why are they here, or what do they want, or where they're coming from. That question is irrelevant. When you get past all of the things that you have been made to feel that your life is about in this milieu of being an American and being on the planet Earth and going to work for a living and I have a Chevy truck and my house is worth this much money and I don't like my Pop-Tarts, I like the unfrosted ones and not the frosted ones, and I'm a guy who likes a double cheeseburger, not just one patty. And when you get past all of that shit that has been foisted upon you for your whole fucking life and get down to why am I here, the answer is as basic as why whatever is reaching out to us to say hello that doesn't have all of those distractions would also have to say, which is, I'm here, and I'd like you to know that because I don't want to be alone in the universe any more than I have to be. There's something else over there. I want to go and say hello to you. Why does it have to be a nefarious plot? Why does it have to be some hybrid project? Why does it have to be something that sounds like it's human contrived? This is something people would do to forward an agenda. Why?
Yeah.
And I think the reason why is because we insist on it being complex. We just can't wrap our minds around the fact that the biggest story in human history, to modern human history at least to date, the existence, the proving the existence of intelligent extraterrestrial or interdimensional life that's been visiting or is visiting this planet or whatever the case may be, is solved, it's proven, is just they're here because they want to say hello. They're here because they saw us and they like us. They'd like to get to know us. Folks, I think it's as simple as that. I really do. I think it's the guy who moves in across the street and looks out the window and goes, I wonder if there's anybody here that would be nice, that maybe I could hang out with. I think it's that simple, Michael. I don't think that it's a big plot I don't think it's a big, huge book that Isaac Asimov wrote. That's wonderful when you want to sit down and pass some of the time that we have to spend here. But I think the answer is incredibly simple. And I don't think our brains are willing to accept that. I think our heart spaces know that's true. And it's more than willing to beat with that information in unison. But our brains get in the way and say, no, there's no way it can be that simple. I personally, Jack Hansen, is here to tell you he thinks it is, at least.
Yeah. No, I like it. And so I would be remiss if I did not ask this on behalf of our audience, because, guys, Jack Hansen is a very well-read person in this topic. I mean, you followed it for a long, long time. Now,
I've been into it since I was a young boy.
Right. And that's a long time because you're old. But
yeah, that is true. I am old. So.
I will say that what do you think is going to come about of this disclosure that we're all supposed to be waiting and on pins and needles for? What do you think the disclosure is going to be?
Well, I guess that's two separate questions. What do you think will happen, and what do I think it will be? I think que sera, sera, as far as what it will be. I think whatever will be, will be. And I think in my best moments as a spirit, or whatever you'd want to call this energy, because really that's what everything is I'm the energy guy. At the end of the day, I'd really like Jack Hansen to be remembered for his work in this particular area, at least, as the energy guy. The guy that maybe tried to teach us, or thought crazily enough, because we know it's not true now, that everything is this stuff we call energy, because really that's true. And it's a great way for us to remove the dogmatic aspects of theology, and science can just pretty much be shoved with all of its, intricate insights to the background. Everything is what we could call energy. You are, I am, and every single thing that we know within the universe is energy. Even in my personal opinion, and especially perhaps spiritual energy. There's such a thing as spiritual energy. So thought is energy. Our belief in something is energy. All of that, our intuition, there's nothing that the fibers of energy doesn't commingle with. It makes up everything. And then that really allows for a basic instrument for us to continue then in a really nice way and say, okay, we're grounded in the fact that everything is this energy. So now we have all these questions, and it makes it easier to tread upon without getting in the way of each other and arguing, because then religion is a bollard for somebody that they crash into. And then science is one over here that somebody else crashes into, and it retards their progress. It stops them from moving on and asking any more questions, or maybe getting to the heart of the fact that their question doesn't have much relevance because they need to be asking something different. But those things, they stultify their progress and their inspiration to go any further. So, what do I think is going to happen with this is, again, que sera, sera. As I started to say, I think in the best possible moments as me, this energy is inside of this human shell that I have. The whole thing about, Mom used to say whenever we were upset, everything will be okay. The whole thought that everything is okay and will be okay is never more paramount true. I mean, even if something slams into us at high speed and we all die a fiery death, everything is okay. Death it happens to everybody. It's something we all have to go through. And so again, I don't think I'm really overly concerned about it from that perspective. And what we all, I think, are afraid to, because remember when we talked about death some time ago, and I present my own thoughts about what we really fear when we die, which is we fear losing this identity, this thing that we are. Physically, we may be afraid to be in pain, or we may not want to, face a tough death that involves, bludgeoning or something awful like that. But what we really fear when we say, well, I'm afraid to die, is I'm afraid to lose touch with this Jack Hansen person that I have become to know. And that's understandable. It's the blueprint that you're holding on to and running through this life carrying. But I think in the same sense, what is it that we fear when we talk about this discovery, this disclosure that, now it's out there. These things are real. We aren't officially alone in a universal sense. There are other beings, and they're visiting us, and we still don't know what they're up to. What do they want? There's all that too. But I think what we're afraid to lose in all of that is we're afraid to let go of Footloose. I think we're afraid to let go of the 80s, Back to the Future, double cheeseburgers, you name it. I think we all have an intuitive sense that so many of the things that we love are not going to be relevant to us anymore once there's a true proliferation of the fact that there are other beings in on this, and this is going to wildly take precedent over anything you have been worried about in your own life, so to speak, to date. It will become more important than where you went to school, certainly more important than what you do for a living and how much money you have and where you live and where you like to vacation. All of that will become highly irrelevant in the face of this information on a broader base. Maybe not initially, but eventually it's coming. And that's the fear. The fear is letting go of the social disposition that you have been born into and sold dollar by dollar from day one, because we have to let it go. I'm eager to let it go. I don't, for as much as I like this Jack Hansen person that I get to run around and be, I just described to you earlier in the most clarion of honesty how much money I spend online looking around for all this stuff, and how much, more importantly, time I spend doing this. And yeah, you have to fill your time with something, but what if I could fill my time hanging out with, I can't even say his name because it's got like 4 8s and a couple of J's, and, from this other dimension who wants to hang out with me today and show me a few things, like Paul putting his left hand on my head and sharing a couple pieces of the cosmos with me today. Yeah, I'm going to sit in on that class today. It was always promised to us in all theologies, just about, help was always promised to humanity in some form, whether you believe that it's the returning of Jesus Christ or the angels in different senses from the Vedic texts, but help was always promised to be offered along humanity's journey. And I think this is just part of it. And it's not really help from a divine source. It's just a remembering that, hey, there are other things out there that have gotten over this massive speed bump that we just continue to want to take at high speed. They're going to show us how to get around it and be on our way without breaking the damn car.
Come from the land where the wheat is still wheat, where the water in the rivers is still water. In this land, every man lends a hand when you need it, but your hands are full of life, so you can help yourself and feel it.
Han Solo, the pilots who make the Castle Run in under 12 parsecs. You
12.
were right.
I thought it was 12.
You were right.
It's pretty hard to take me to town on Star Wars, the first 3 anyway, because I saw them all like 7,000 times. So,
well, the Kessel Run does have 20 parsecs, and that's the tidbit of information that I saw right off the bat, and then I actually read the full Han Solo quote. So, I have no idea how they tell time, but supposedly there's 20 parsecs in the hyperspace route, and the Millennium Falcon made it in under 12. So let's just run with that.
Fair enough. And number one creature I want to hang out with from Star Wars of all time, Max Rebo from the Cy Snoodles and the Rebo Band, the blue elephant guy playing the keyboard. He's awesome.
I want to hang out with that little creature that goes...
Salacious Crumb.
Oh, what are we listening to today, Jack?
Oh, this is my favorite UFO song of all time. We talked about those today. British band. This is Martian Landscape.
Until we meet again.
Well, it looks like Jack and Michael have finished up their latest chat about all things existence. But if anything they said got your own Existence Brewing, be sure and catch their other talks at existencebrewing.com and drop them an email to share your thoughts using contact@existencebrewing.com.
Existence Brewing.